Jodelle Show. I'm Jodelle as usual, and I have invited Georgie back with me. Georgie Dinkov is here. Hi, Georgie.
Hi. Hello, everybody.
Back today to talk about energy or lack thereof, because it seems like there's a lot of people that I hear in my practice, at least, that are, I'm tired all the time. Why do I get up exhausted? I go to bed exhausted. I have no energy. So we're going to touch on energy today and just exactly what the problem is or problems in our modernized society that could be contributing to lack of energy. And also, Georgie's just going to give us his expert opinion on how to raise energy levels, how to improve our energy. But per my request, and not Georgie's, we're actually going to be discussing one of his amazing products that actually helps with energy production. So Georgie is a pretty humble guy. He's not going to want to promote his products at all. So this is all me, and I don't make any cut off of promoting these products. I just love his products, and I know they do what they say they're supposed to do. So I love promoting something that I use and believe in. So that's what we're going to do at the end here. We're just going to talk maybe like a podcast and tell you just about why this product in particular does exactly what it says it's supposed to do for energy. So yeah, so this is all my idea, not Georgie's. I'm just a big fan of Idea Lab supplements, so we'll talk about that in just a bit. But Georgie, to get started, I want to hear from you, like your feelings on where exactly is the problem here with regard to energy. Like, why are we seeing so many people with low energy and exhaustion?
Okay. There are a multitude of reasons. There's several big ones. First of all, it depends on the season. I think everybody will agree that in the fall and the winter we feel down, right? We get tired more easily. Our mood is not entirely, it's just not very positive. We tend to get cranky very easily.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes back to metabolism, because sunshine, exposure to sunshine, especially the red portions of light, the red portions of the spectrum, are crucial for activating a crucial metabolic enzyme for producing energy in the body. It's called cytochrome C oxidase. And that enzyme gets very quickly deactivated by a number of things such as stress, nitric oxide, inflammation, darkness. Serotonin is a great deactivator of that enzyme as well. And without the proper function of that enzyme, we can't really properly complete the energetic cycle from food to oxygen. So we're stuck into the less effective modes of energy production, which typically involves the overactivation of glycolysis. And the product of the end product of glycolysis is something called pyruvate. And if cytochrome C oxidase is not working, if the entire energetic cycle is not working properly all the way up to oxygen, we tend to build up pyruvate, and as a result, we tend to also build up lactic acid. Lactic acid, most people are familiar with it from the muscle burning that we get when we over-exercise. But in lower amounts, lactic acid is a sort of a metabolic toxin. It interferes with the proper production of energy from food. It basically turns on a number of different stress mechanisms that we discussed previously: the cortisol system, the serotonin system, the adrenaline system, and also basically serves as an inflammatory mediator of sorts. And really, because it's a metabolic burden, lactic acid ironically takes more energy to process and more energy to get rid of, right? And the way this happens is that lactic acid is transported from various tissues back to the liver, where through something called the Cori cycle, it gets converted back into pyruvate. But you see the vicious cycle here. If pyruvate cannot continue on through the various steps, various jumps of the metabolic pathway, and it cannot properly get to oxygen to create the carbon dioxide and water as the final byproduct, we're just going to keep cycling through this pyruvate, lactate, pyruvate, lactate, pyruvate, lactate cycle, and it's a very inefficient way of producing energy. And even if it was working well, still the very fact that we're overproducing lactate has a very systemic sort of like downing effect on us, both on mood and on physiological functioning, which most people tend to feel as, I'm always like, it's almost like I'm dragging myself with this tremendous effort. Like my legs like don't want to move, they're kind of like stuck to the ground, and I have to drag my feet almost with this mental exertion. I have to force myself to move. All of this is kind of like the result of inefficient energy production, high lactate, high cortisol, high serotonin, et cetera, et cetera. And opposite to that is, most people during the summer, especially when they're feeling healthier, they feel very light on their feet. That expression comes from somewhere. To feel light on your feet, that's where it's coming from. It comes from an abundance of energy, and you can actually, the reason most people feel frolicking and playful when they have this, during the summers, because they have extra energy. Like if you don't have energy to spend, clearly in the winter when you're barely moving, you're not going to feel like playing racquetball or softball or football, whatever it is. You can barely move, right? Mm-hmm. But that changes in the summer or the spring when metabolism improves, and then you have an excess of energy, and you can spend some of that excess on playful things, on playful events.
You said something at the beginning about the red light from like sun and stuff like that. Do you think that a lot of the energy demands that we're missing out on that are contributed by being outdoors is part of our problem too, because we've become kind of an indoor nation, if you will?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only because we're indoors, but because we've replaced the natural sunlight with these luminescent neon lights. Mm-hmm. And you're being told by many doctors and professionals like, oh, it doesn't matter as long as it's light, it's okay. But, anecdotally, and by the way, there are studies about that too for the people that care, but anecdotally, I don't know of a single person who can live in an office setting and not feel like this chill, this like malaise over time. And if they spend like 3-4 hours under the neon lights, they just don't feel right, Something, it just tells them they're not feeling well. That's why they run for a coffee break. That's why they go outside for a cigarette break. Whatever it is, I guess even cigarette is preferable to sitting under those toxic lights. And that's not a coincidence. The spectrum of the neon lights, and actually most of indoor lights, is shifted heavily towards the blue portion of the spectrum. And the blue portion has a heavily inhibitory effect on metabolism, on that enzyme, cytochrome C oxidase, that light-sensing enzyme in our cells. And I don't know how many people know, but they sell these instruments, and they emit UV light, but UV light is still towards the spectrum of blue. So the UV light is used to actually sterilize vegetables, cookware, and a number of different things. It just looks like a lamp, right? And you just turn it on and you shine it on anything you want to sterilize. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason they're being sold is that ultraviolet light kills living creatures if it's in high enough amount. Mm-hmm. Same thing will happen to us. It's just that we will need a much more intense light bulb to kill a human being. But it does kill, and the way it kills is through inhibiting the energy production mechanisms of living creatures, including bacteria, including fungi. They have the same or very similar metabolic chain, which uses food to produce energy, and light is a very crucial aspect of it. Blue light and bluish and ultraviolet lights inhibit the energy production, while red, reddish, and infrared tend to activate the energy production.
Yeah, so and you're right. There are so many studies on the fact that the light can actually affect our system, our mitochondria. There's studies that say that blue light in particular elevates glucose, which I would assume is from a stress response. So the elevation of cortisol.
If it's not metabolized, then it builds up in the bloodstream, right? It's not metabolized. That's a sign and symptom that that's same thing as in diabetics. For people think it's a blood sugar disease. It's not. It's a sign/symptom that the sugar is not metabolized, so it keeps circulating in the blood. It's almost like the body perceives that it needs more sugar because it's so inefficiently metabolizing the one that it has right now due to various reasons.
Yeah, I was listening to Arthur Furstenberg. He's big on cell phone usage and stuff like that. And he actually said that the stress caused by our device usage and how much we're on cell phones and computers and things like that and around Wi-Fi is contributing to diabetes. It's one of the main causes of diabetes because of the stress response from the stress of our body being exposed to all of this. So I don't think people realize how much these EMFs and blue light and radiation are actually energy zappers. They're zapping us of energy. Would you agree?
Yep. Absolutely. And the phone, not sure if you see the article recently, there's something called the phantom ring syndrome. It's like, so basically your phone is in your pocket, it's on vibration, but you feel like it's vibrating and you keep checking it compulsively. Mm-hmm. Of course, I shouldn't say of course, if nobody's calling, there's no message, yet you still feel that the phone is vibrating. It turned out that this is actually due to elevated cortisol. And apparently, so it's still not clear whether the phone is directly causing the cortisol to rise because of the EMF radiation that it's outputting, or whether we're so addicted to checking the phone that, we feel this compulsion. The body is even creating like a fake signal. Oh, you have a mail, you better check it. Or, oh, somebody liked your Instagram post, you better check it. So it's not completely clear. I would say it's probably a bit of both, because there is evidence that if continuous exposure to the electromagnetic radiation that the phone puts out, there is evidence that this inhibits the proper metabolism of glucose. So I would expect it to elevate the blood glucose because it prevents it from metabolizing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the quote-unquote addiction aspect. We're so in tune with our devices, they're almost like a part of us. Yeah. And when that thing is not functioning constantly, we almost feel like, oh my God, it's like my heart is not beating properly. I gotta check up on it, right? Yeah.
Well, and
So
I'm glad you brought up the heart, because I actually wanted to talk to you about that. I have several people in my life currently that are like in the hospital with heart issues. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen such a mass amount of people having heart issues that I know of, and that are in the hospital, and people dealing with heart issues. And I think people forget that our heart is the electric center of us. It's very electric. And I think when we're exposed to all these devices, not only is it affecting our heart electrically, but that could be part of the energy system that's being tanked, is because these currents are going through us, and it affects the rhythm of our heart, the pace of our heart, and the strength of our heart. Would you agree?
I would agree. Not only the heart, but the brain. I mean, it's not, first of all, most people probably know about the EKG and the EEG you get in the hospitals, right? These are electric current reading machines. Mm-hmm. So even mainstream medicine accepts that the heart and the brain are driven by electricity, and you can measure their activity by measuring the electric current and the basic diagnose pathology. Now, mm-hmm. medicine hasn't yet reached the point where they're starting to they can modulate those fields and treat the pathology. For them, it's too far of a jump still, but it's there. Clearly, if these are electrical devices, then you should be able to modulate their activity as well. Medicine is still stuck in the genetic paradigm. But long story short, every cell of your body is an electronic machine. Yeah. The ions are moving from food to oxygen, and any strong electrical current is likely to interfere with that electron flow somehow. It may accelerate it in some part of tissue, it may decelerate in another. No matter what it does, it still interferes with the normal flow of electrons, which your body is perfectly capable of controlling itself. You don't need to add another multi-wattage instrument that's sitting right there and beaming this radiation 24/7. That's definitely going to lead to disturbances, if not directly disease.
Yeah, I would say if I could help these people, if they would want to hear what I had to say, I would want to tell them, when you get out of the hospital, let's work on like not having that rectangle in your pocket all the time or next to your heart or whatever, and try to avoid the usage so much, and see if your heart actually improves in its arrhythmias and things like that, because I do feel like a lot of these electronic devices are affecting our electronic device, which is our heart. Yes. And our brain, like you said. Every
cell is an electronic device. We are nothing but electronic machines. And the more people think about us in that way, in that aspect, the more, I guess, they'll, first of all, freak out. Yeah. In tune with what we really are and how much we are affected by everything on the outside.
Yeah.
Genes are a very small portion of what we are. Most of it is the flow of electrons.
Yeah, Arthur Furstenberg, the gentleman I was talking about, also discussed how the device that like you're usually holding, the smartphone or the tablet or something like that, is basically a microwave with the door open. Like you really don't get a lot of effect from being around a microwave that's cooking the food with the door closed, and it'd be kind of hard to cook it with the door open. But a cell phone or a tablet is very similar to actually having a microwave right in your vicinity with the door open cooking, which is very dangerous. So I don't think people realize that, but that's just something I wanted them to think about. Like you said, sometimes when you just make them think, then they get a little scared, but they also do something about it, So as far as like let's talk about nervous energy. You know how people feel wired but tired. Does that have a lot to do with that aspect of adrenaline, kind of running on adrenaline, and your body is kind of getting you through the moment?
Yes. So I don't know if we touched this upon in the previous shows, but basically there are two main sources of energy in your organism: the thyroid pathway and then the stress pathway, which involves cortisol and adrenaline. So when thyroid is working well, you're processing sugar properly, you're oxidizing it completely, or as completely as you can, to carbon dioxide and water. Very little lactic acid is produced. Whatever little lactic acid is produced is transfers to the liver. Liver is functioning well. It's handling, right? And then if that's not working, and there are many ways to turn off thyroid function: stress, toxins, bad lifestyle, the electronic devices, overexposure to electronic devices you mentioned. Ionizing radiation in hospitals is a huge and a very good way, because In fact, if you have thyroid cancer, the way they kill your thyroid gland literally is by beaming it with radiation. It's very sensitive to these external stressors, bad food, overindulging in alcohol. Smoking can do it in small amounts, can be a little bit stimulating, but in general, it's also a thyroid stressor. So the more you turn off the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland is really predominant when you're younger. It's not a coincidence that we're so beaming up with energy when we're younger, because thyroid is in charge. And over time, thyroid gets shut down by various stressors / toxins. And of course, the body, in order to survive, it needs an emergency alternative of fuel production. And an emergency alternative is the adrenal system, which is also known as the system that maintains the fight or flight response. Now, as soon as I say fight or flight, I think it already in the definition, most people will realize that that's probably not something you want to have turned on all the time, right? You don't want to be in a situation where, evolutionarily speaking, you're running away from a hungry bear 24/7. That's not a way to live a productive, calm, or energetic life. Yes, you may be energetic, but not in a good way. You'll be essentially, running for your life. And that's really what I'm seeing most people are doing. They're kind of like these hamsters in wheels, and they're running for their lives 24/7. They can't relax. So what happens is that because this stress system is overactivated, first of all, it starts to waste glucose because the stress system, when it turns off various enzymes of energy production in the mitochondria. So you start relying almost entirely on glycolysis when it comes to metabolizing the sugar, which means you will be producing a lot of lactic acid. Lactic acid interferes with the synthesis of the major inhibitory neurotransmitter known as GABA aminobutyric acid, and actually helps convert the GABA, which is the calming neurotransmitter, into the one that's exciting your brain, known as glutamate. So basically, when you're see how the production of energy is intimately intertwined with a number of different signs and symptoms that we know. We don't think of them as energetic, but ultimately they are, because everything in the body requires energy or lack thereof for something to happen or not happen. So low energy means less GABA, more glutamate, more serotonin, and of course more adrenaline, because the adrenal system, whenever cortisol arises, it also stimulates the release of adrenaline. And adrenaline, everybody knows that you cannot be relaxed when you have an adrenaline. That's why you go to get your adrenaline rush, right? You're not going to fall asleep when you're jumping with a parachute. You better not be, right? So clearly, if we're able to replicate that adrenaline rush, which you're getting from a parachute jump, if you're able to replicate that willingly or unwillingly in your regular lifestyle, and this continues unstopped for doesn't have to be 24/7. Let's just say it's just your waking hours. I mean, that's just, it just doesn't immediately, even intuitively, for a person who has never heard of biochemistry, just doesn't sound like it will be something healthy in the long run. Who thinks that being in a state of constant airplane jumping 8 hours a day, 5 to 6, sometimes 7 days a week, who thinks this is a healthy way to live? Even the adrenaline junkies probably don't think that way. They'll do it for 1 or 2 hours, but that's it. After that, they also want their rest. Unfortunately, the body has adaptation mechanisms. And while the adrenaline system, the stress, the fight or flight response system is activated, thyroid will be shut off. So if this continues chronically, you get into the state of the body's basically taking this as a signal that says, well, maybe life is stressful. Maybe I need to maintain this mode of energy production because it's easy, it's cheap. It doesn't give me that much energy, but it doesn't require much machinery and much processing to maintain. So that's the stress energy production. So it's very easy to maintain, produces a tiny amount of energy compared to the thyroid pathway, but that's what the body prefers during stress. It requires less maintenance. It requires less resources to operate. And over time, and with aging or with chronic stress, we become essentially stress machines, and that stress machine never turns off. So in order for us to sleep, actually sleep and high energy go very well together. Probably most people who have been around small children know that they have a very peculiar pattern of activity. They're extremely active for about an hour, and then they get very, very tired. They may even take a nap, right? They will sleep for maybe half an hour. Then they wake up recharged. Puppies are like that too. Small kittens are like that too. It's not a coincidence. That's how the thyroid pathway works. It works while you have glycogen available, and of course thyroid hormone floating around. As soon as the glycogen is depleted, that's the signal for the young organism that I shouldn't be going any further because I'll be activating the stress system. I better stop down now. I better stop now or slow down now, rest, replenish, right? And then I can continue working. I can continue doing whatever it was that I was doing. Well, we adults don't have this luxury. We live these lives. Well, maybe we do, but we're being told that we don't have this luxury. Right. So we end up in a state of where we're constantly on. So when we deplete our glycogen, basically society says, I don't care. You keep going, right? You have a family to feed. You have to do work. You have to perform. You have to beat the competition, and on and on and on and on it goes until that becomes the default mode. Now, it can be turned off, but it takes practice. It takes realization that this is not good for you. It takes some lifestyle changes. It takes maybe some supplements, but they're all available over the counter. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. But I think above all, it takes the mental change that this rat race, this running in a wheel that most of us have been put in a situation of, it takes a mental change to understand that this is not healthy. It really isn't. All it takes is talking to former professional athletes, really top-end athletes who really crashed after their career ended. Some of them crashed during their careers, and that's why they ended. They got like some kind of an injury, or they simply, their bodies gave up. They ended up in a hospital with overexhaustion. They never regained their previous shape. They weren't able to compete competitively. What you're seeing in those people, a very concentrated version of our own lives. In those people, it takes 5 to 10 years, and after that, they're completely done, right? Maybe that's why they get paid so much. It's like you have to compensate for the tremendously shorter career span with much higher amount of money, because after these people are finished with their regular career, they're not good for much. I mean, many of them develop addictions. Many of them turn to a life of crime. None of these things are really surprising. It all comes down to their energy production is so compromised that by the time they're finished with their career, quote unquote, they have very little life left in them. So, and there should be a warning to us as well. We don't want to be that way. Even if for us it takes 30, 40, 50 years, it's still not a good way to be, not a good way to end and live like the later years of your life.
Yeah, anybody who's had that chronic fight or flight feeling, and athletes can relate, because sometimes it's like, yeah, you have energy to get through the day, but then you lay down in bed at night and you're like, I could still run a marathon right now. Like your heart is racing, you feel hot, like you can't relax. And I've been there. That is not a good feeling. It's almost like you wish you would get tired. And so some people do have the other extreme where they have like too much energy, and it's the wrong kind of energy. It's that nervous, I'm running on adrenaline energy. Yeah. And like you said, that's not where you want to be either, and it's not healthy. And so it is to the point where they have to decide, okay, this is not normal, and now somebody has informed me that this feeling is not normal. I should be able to put my head on a pillow and go to sleep and stay asleep. And if that's not you, then there's something going on that we need to address. Right. But you mentioned glycogen when you were talking there just a minute ago, and so I wanted to touch on the fact that that could be a big issue with people's energy, because we do have this keto craze and carnivore craze and the low carb craze. And so, you'll hear it that, again, they go into that adrenaline state at the beginning and they think they feel really good, but talk to them 6 months later and a lot of them can't get out of bed. So can you talk about why the lack of glycogen in the liver could be part of the problem with energy?
So as we discussed in one of the previous shows, there are 3 macronutrients, right? And you can oxidize all 3 of them for fuel to basically to keep yourself going. But really, like, actually one of them gets converted into the other. So there are only 2 macronutrients used for energy: glucose or fat. Mm-hmm. And the amino acid / protein gets converted to glucose before it gets metabolized. Some of them can get oxidized directly. It's not a good way, because if you're oxidizing protein, means you're producing ammonia. Every amino acid contains the amino group. Every time you're using amino acids for fuel, you're producing ammonia. Even the very, very hardcore paleo people will admit that it's not a good idea to oxidize protein for fuel. So they think it's, they only leaves 2 things, glucose and fat. We don't like the glucose, so it must be fat. Must be fat. What's really oxidizing fat must be what's good for us. There is something called the Randall cycle in the cell. So at any point in time, the cell can only oxidize / metabolize either glucose or fatty acids. It cannot do both. And both of these macronutrients tend to block each other's oxidation. So if you're eating a meal that's high on carbs, you will be oxidizing most of the carbs, and most of the fat will not be oxidized, right? Whether this fat is coming from the fat stores or it's coming from the meal, most of that fat will not be oxidized. Or if you, conversely, if you're eating mostly fat and no sugar, you'll be mostly oxidizing fat. The problem starts that where this starts becoming problematic is that in general, the oxidation of fat, evolutionary speaking, was meant as a signal of stress, of bad times. Like the whole point of having fatty reserves is that when times are tough and there's not enough food, you can get by for a few, for a few days or even weeks without eating. You do need water, you do need to drink, and you can die much more quickly from dehydration, but you can get by, you can survive without food for a few weeks, some people even months. But in general, as soon as you start oxidizing fat, this is a sign for the organism that it really needs to turn off all of the non-essential functions and focus on maintaining you alive at the expense of pretty much everything else that's non-essential. And as we discussed before, these non-essential functions, which is what really makes you human, include cognitive function, include the ability to empathize with others, sexual function, basically creativity, ability to properly reason, all of these things that we think of as making us uniquely human, and they're present in animals too. But many people think that the ability to empathize is something very human. The ability to create, the ability to interact with a child, all of these things go out the door the moment you switch to oxidizing mostly fat. And the reason is, just as I said, it's a sign that we've actually exposed on ourselves. And we've told ourselves by eating mostly fat or restricting glucose in the food or overexerting ourselves, which are all ways to increase fatty acid oxidation, we're basically telling our body things are not good. Now, the paleo community and many of the doctors promoting this, they never address this aspect of evolutionary biology, but it's there. It's been shown on multiple animal models up to the humanoid apes like gorillas, chimps, and orangutans, that when you give them glucose to eat basically carb-heavy meals, they tend to be gregarious, even towards unknown organisms, such as like unknown human taking pictures of them in the forest, or like a human interacting with them, or even human playing with their babies, which is really a threat to any animal in the wild. You'd protect your children at all costs, especially from an unknown creature that you've never seen before. Well, they actually did these studies and found out that apes are gregarious and friendly and altruistic and not warlike when you give them carb-heavy meals. As soon as the meals shift over to, now of course they use meat, so somebody can say, well, maybe because you gave them meat that you triggered their carnivorous gene or something. That maybe, but the study showed conclusively that when you start feeding them meat-heavy diets, which had almost no carbs, but a lot of fat and a decent amount of protein, these apes, all of them, and not just the apes, but other animal organisms like rodents that they used, right? Mice, rats, and hamsters, all of these became very aggressive, even to each other, like even to organisms that are part of their own community. And I don't think all of these things make perfect sense when you realize that the oxidation of fat is a sign, is a universal signal from the environment that the environment is not currently friendly to you and to your fellow organisms. So you need to turn off all functions that are not necessary for survival. Empathy is usually not necessary for survival when you're on the battlefield. Creativity usually isn't, right? You just, most of the military will tell you that when they go through basic training, they undergo a 4-week period through which the very goal of that training is to destroy the ability to think creatively unless given orders to do so. So it's not a coincidence. The military is very afraid of creativity because, frankly, I understand kind of a little bit of their point. If you're on the battlefield and you order a regiment to march in one direction, and then half of them say, you know what, I don't think it's a good idea, we're just going to do something else, then you don't have a very good military, at least not a military that's easy to control. And that's a nightmare for a commander. But as far as us as individuals goes, creativity is both a vital tool for survival and a vital part of being human. And as soon as creativity starts declining, that's actually a good sign, among other signs, that your environment is not optimal, that your dietary regimens are not optimal, that you're probably not sleeping properly, that in general your life is not going in the right direction. And that's what the oxidation of fat does. It's a very basic primitive signal, and its opposing signal is the oxidation of glucose. These two things always clash. These two things always work against each other. There's this never-ending cycle of stress recovery, stress recovery. You can think of glucose as the recovery portion, but it goes beyond recovery. It's just if you're mostly in the glucose oxidation aspect of life, you tend to be a lot more human than you are when you're in the fat oxidation aspect of life, which turns on your lizard brain, as they call it. And you really are not pleasant to be around. You don't want to be around others to start with. And in general, your function as a human is a pale shadow of its former self.
And I think with the low carb keto craze, I think people don't realize that when they're craving all of these low carb desserts and they're trying to make these keto desserts, that their body's telling them something. You need some glucose, you need some sugar. So they try to make everything with erythritol and make it still keto friendly and stuff. But really they're getting to a point where their body's saying, can I please have some glucose? Can I please store some glycogen? I really need to make some enzymatic processes happen, and I need to calm the stress response. Can I please have this? And so I think they're not hearing that. But based on what you said, we can obviously see that their energy levels, it's no wonder many of them start to tank after a bit of time on those diets.
Yeah, basically the energy levels tank, the stress response is immediately activated as soon as you start oxidizing fat. They're really so intimately connected. I mean, the stress response thrives on fatty acid oxidation, and it promotes even more fatty acid oxidation. Mm-hmm. So it forms, the keto people will say, oh, it forms a great positive cycle. I call it a vicious cycle, because you don't want to be in that state all the time. Mm-hmm. As soon as you start talking about a stress response instead of fatty acid oxidation, then people's ears perk up, and then they start to be a lot more understanding. Mm-hmm. It's just right now the oxidizing of fat and shedding of glucose is such a fad, such a fashionable thing, that you cannot break through that wall unless you start saying, let's talk about the stress reaction and how the oxidation of fat really goes hand in hand with this thing together. And even a first-year medical student will have a very hard time explaining or at least linking glucose oxidation to stress. They're known to be antagonistic. You give glucose to tame the stress response. You don't give glucose to activate it. Yet, on the other hand, the exact opposite thing happens with fat. You give fat to activate the stress response, and conversely, stressing somebody activates the fatty acid oxidation. These things are very well known. Nobody really disputes them. It's just that they're never talked about in the context of the low carb diets and how this interacts with the stress response. The doctors that I've talked to, they usually say, well, yes, it's true. Yes, fatty acid oxidation does trigger a stress response, but it's never comparable in intensity and pathological influence to what would happen if you were really being chased by a bear running in the wild, if you're really truly life-threatening stress. And I said, yes, that's true, but keep in mind these intense stresses typically last for like a few seconds to a few minutes, let's say to an hour, right? Nobody's being chased by a bear 24/7, right? What we've done as humans is we've taken that life-threatening acute stress and we've basically mellowed it out and decreased it, but we've spread it across time. So now we endure it every day, but it continues 24/7, except that it's not as intense as if a bear is chasing you. It's as intense as if a mosquito is constantly buzzing in your ear and never letting you relax. So at the end of the day, the cumulative response is about the same. Whether you drop dead from a heart attack because the bear is chasing you, or it consumed you, or you're constantly bothered by something that interferes with your normal energy production, and you eventually lose your mind. I mean, I guess at the end, the end is unpleasant in both cases. So why go in this direction to start with? And it's to talk about glycogen a little bit. Glycogen is just a long-term storage of glucose that you eat in excess. So when you're consuming meals with glucose or sugar or any other carb, ultimately gets converted to glucose. Then whatever immediate needs the body has, it takes them from the glucose you ingested. Anything extra gets converted to glycogen and a little bit of fat, and it gets stored. The glycogen gets stored in the liver. Now, the proponents of the keto diet will say, yes, fat. When you eat glucose, it makes you fat. Not so. Human studies have shown that you need to eat upwards of 1 pound of sugar a day, more than that, before the fat synthesis mechanism kicks in. So yes, theoretically they're right, but I don't know many people that are eating a pound of sugar a day. Do you?
No.
Already so afraid of it, they barely come close to like a teaspoon. So let's take it easy on the sugar. There's no need to to go down to zero. And let's say there's no need to go all the way up to a pound. How about somewhere in between?
Right.
That'll be perfectly reasonable, like your grandma, right?
Absolutely.
Like your grandma did.
Yeah, grandma always knew best. And yeah, I don't think people realize how important energy is. When you were talking about all the things that our bodies use energy for, like fertility and stress management and the ability to digest food and to handle stressful situations that we come into contact, like traffic and children every day, like different just life situations. And there's so many people that their adrenals are tanked too with like adrenal exhaustion, so they're unable to even handle these situations. I always equate it to like that feeling of you had to get ready for a big event and you had to do all these things, and so you had energy for that, but afterwards it almost took you like 2 or 3 days to recover from the event because you maxed out your energy levels. And people are living in those 2 days for eons of time. That feeling that they're in those 2 days, they're like living that, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I think if when people come in for consultations and stuff and they say, I want to lose weight or I want to look good for my cruise. Well, let's look at energy levels first, because if your body's so stressed and so in fight or flight, the last thing it's going to do is lose weight, so we have to address the energy needs first. So going into that, let me hear your top 3 suggestions for improving our energy. Where do we begin?
So first of all, you have to realize that if you're stressing yourself, if basically your daily routine involves overexerting yourself because this is how you think life should be, that needs to change, because the brain controls everything. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the mentality of basically no pain, no gain, that needs to change, because I can tell you that definitely does not apply to health, right? Right. You don't have to suffer in order to be healthy. Maybe it's true for some aspects of life, maybe, and it's a big maybe, but I can guarantee you that it's not true when it comes to health. As far as losing weight, just as you mentioned, you already hinted to it, you want to be raising your metabolism. Now, there are 2 ways to do that. One of them is the natural way, which means you need to have a high resting metabolic rate. And the second one is people are raising their metabolic rate with exertion, which is yet another type of stress. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that 90% and probably even more of people go down the route of, I have to run, I have to do all of these things, all of these stressful things in order for me to lose weight. That is actually an artificial and very unhealthy way of raising your metabolism. There's the resting metabolic rate versus the non-resting metabolic rate. What we need to be doing is raising the resting metabolic rate. In other words, creating a body that burns calories while doing nothing, right? Mm-hmm. It almost sounds too good to be true, but your muscles burn mostly fat at rest. So if you have a decent amount of muscle mass and maintain fat mass at a relatively low level, then you'll be able to eat a lot more food and be a lot leaner and a lot healthier without actually doing much or even anything, compared to somebody who is running half marathons twice a week. And these people will look skinny and catabolic, and they may be able to fit into their jeans that they used to wear when they were in college. But the moment these people decrease their activity, or parenthesis stress, the pounds start piling on, and these people cannot be recognized. I've seen people, former athletes, who, just as I mentioned, who stopped their active career, and even though they continued to work out, they were really very active even after that. These people turn into balloons. Right. And that's what happens, because the chronic stress, the chronically raising your non-resting metabolic rate, really tells your body that, I'm under stress. Thyroid needs to be shut down. All of these things, all of these processes which used to take energy when you're at rest have been shut down, because the body thinks you're under duress and you're under a survival threat. So then all that remains is the very basic metabolic functions that keep you alive. That's what constant stress does. And so when you stop stressing yourself, now you have a body that's mostly turned off. Of course, everything will get turned to fat when you eat the meal, because your body's resting metabolic rate is now a fraction of what it used to be. Adaptively, the body said, well, I don't need to have this high metabolism. This person, can barely survive. So then you're finding yourself with a resting metabolic rate of maybe even 30% of what it used to be. What this means is that now you have to eat only 1/3 of the calories that you used to eat before. That's not a good metric of health. Even mainstream medicine will, when they ask you how many calories you eat, they want to hear a number that's upwards of 1,500 for an adult. If you start saying you're eating 600 to 700 calories a day, then they'll basically consider this a starvation type diet. And unless there's a very good reason for it, you may even be labeled as mentally ill, like an anorexic or orthorexic or one of the other millions of disorders that that have already been codified. So how do we lose weight? Keeping resting metabolic rate high, which means limiting exposure to stress, building up muscle mass, eating meals that have some carbs. You don't have to go crazy on the carbs, but going low on the carbs is not a good solution. And of course, making sure that the fats that we eat are mostly of the saturated type, because they're the ones that do not promote inflammation. They do not promote endotoxin. They're the ones which your grandma would recommend, with like beef tallow, like dairy fat. Butter is great. Olive oil, it's a really good quality olive oil. These are the fats that we were meant to eat. All of the grain fats, especially the ones from things like peanut oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, all of these oils were about 80 years ago, they were considered a waste product. They weren't considered fit for human consumption. It's just that the industry very cleverly and ingeniously realized that they can pay some important people to publish studies. And once you publish studies by important people, the public is convinced. So that's how we got into the situation. We're now eating mostly junk. Well, I shouldn't say we're eating. We're being sold mostly junk if we're not careful. And we need to be careful and cognizant of what we're eating. And in terms of supplements, I think something like a daily aspirin or a little bit of niacinamide, vitamin B3 can go a long way towards limiting the stress response. Both of these chemicals, niacinamide lowers the elevation of free fatty acids in the blood, which, as we just described, the oxidation of fat is a surrogate for stress. Aspirin does the same, but aspirin has a number of different benefits as well. It limits the synthesis of cortisol, the excess synthesis of cortisol. It also inhibits lipolysis. And in higher dosages, actually, aspirin directly inhibits the oxidation of fat. This is one of the reasons why aspirin is probably helpful for heart disease, for like an ongoing heart attack that's already taking place. To this day, the gold standard is, they say, crush an aspirin and keep it under your tongue, right? And despite the fact that the official version is that there's no known mechanism for this aspirin's benefit of saving somebody with an ongoing heart attack, the only known mechanism that we have so far is, well, we know it's not inflammation because it doesn't work that fast. The only one thing remains. Aspirin inhibits the oxidation of fat and promotes the oxidation of glucose. And that apparently is great for the heart. Well, if it's great for the heart, and the heart is such an electronically important organ, it's probably good for your brain, and it's likely good for the rest of your body. And there are multiple studies that support that.
So to recap, we do want to make sure that we're getting glycogen or glucose in our system. We do want to make sure we swap out the PUFAs to saturated fats, because that's going to decrease our inflammation and help with energy. And I've seen that firsthand in clients that have switched from eating mostly PUFAs because they had no idea, because mainstream says it's okay, to switching to eating saturated fats. And so I've seen that the energy level change just with that. And then also kind of alongside supplements, you're thinking aspirin and also niacinamide. So to that point, let's talk about Energen, which is your supplement that I love and use daily, that actually has niacinamide in it along with some other B vitamins. Talk about the importance of B vitamins, because couldn't this be what a lot of people are deficient in?
Yes, B vitamins are they're really important because among all of the vitamins, because they're cofactors for many enzymes in your body that are involved in energy production. And it just so happens that our food that we're buying, the commercially prepared food, has been in many cases purposefully depleted of those vitamins. And in many times these vitamins are not added back in. So when you're buying, there were laws about this that were put in the books maybe about 30 to 40 years ago. So now most manufacturers are starting to add back in vitamin B1. Right? But it's not just vitamin B1. The B complex vitamins, I think it goes up to like 9 or even 10. So they're only adding back one of the vitamins that they took away. And why are they taking it away? Well, because processed food with less vitamins lasts longer. So these vitamins are also cofactors for a number of bacteria and microorganisms that are metabolizing that food while it's sitting on the shelves. So by removing those vitamins, you're giving this processed food a much longer shelf life, so more profits, right? And in many cases, these vitamins are extracted because they can be sold separately as vitamin products, so it means more profit for the company. So we're basically, at this point, we're being sold this food. Many of the commercial foods that are processed are sold they're simply empty calories. Alcohol gets a lot of blame for being empty calories. Well, guess what? Many of the commercial foods you eat are not much different. They may taste a little better, right? Or maybe not, depends how much you like alcohol. But they're just about as empty calorically as alcohol is. It's just calories. They have almost no nutrients. And as I mentioned, the B vitamins are crucial for a number of different energy production enzymes and the synthesis of a number of different neurotransmitters, which really make us sane. They keep us sane. So vitamin B1, also known as thiamine, is a cofactor for an enzyme called pyruvate dehydrogenase. And that enzyme is crucial for the proper metabolism of glucose. If you have a deficiency of vitamin B1, and I forgot to mention that all of the B complex vitamins get heavily depleted by stress, by alcohol, by electromagnetic radiation, by smoking, by having an abusive spouse or a partner, by being surrounded by toxic people. All of these things increase the requirements for the B vitamins because, as we discussed in one of the previous podcasts, is any challenge from the environment needs to be met with an energetic response. It's a challenge response. So any challenge from the environment that exceeds the, let's say, the baseline of challenges we normally get, we need to get a commensurately bigger response, which means more energy needs to be produced. So if we're under constant stress, which means we're constantly using more of these B vitamins than we normally do at baseline. So studies have shown that about 70 to 80% of the people are chronically deficient in at least one of the B vitamins and without even one of them, if you have a deficiency of even one of them, chances are your energetic processes are not working well. You're not metabolizing glucose or even fat properly. Right. They're just floating around and creating all kinds of havoc. I mean, free fatty acids are now known to destroy kidneys, destroy pancreas, destroy heart, hence the aspirin's beneficial effects. And all these things could be down to something very simple, such as deficiency of one or more of the B vitamins. So long story short, we created this product. It contains most of the vitamins in the B complex group in specific ratios that are based on studies which show that these ratios mimic the physiological levels in your body and help each other. The B vitamins need to be careful with them because if you take too much of one, it tends to inhibit the synthesis of others, or at the very least increase the requirement for the others. And if you don't have them, like if you take 500 milligrams of vitamin B1 but not much of the other B vitamins, then most of the vitamin B1 will go to waste and may even create a stress response because the body says, oh, I need to respond to the extra vitamin B1, but I don't have the others B vitamins to give it to match it properly. Well, we've created the ratio in such a way that it shouldn't give you a stress response, and in fact, most people like it. And it looks like it does lead to improved energy production and glucose metabolism because several people have bought these devices which measure how much carbon dioxide you exhale. And how much carbon dioxide you exhale is a direct surrogate of how well you're metabolizing glucose. Right. So they've measured it, and by taking one dosage of Energen, they've measured that the carbon dioxide is 60 to 70% higher for the next 5 days by taking even only one dose. So we feel confident that this product is beneficial. Not only that, but it should be easy on your wallet too, because it looks like you can only use it once every 5 days and still get the benefit from improved metabolism and lower stress.
That's fantastic. I didn't know about the every 5 days. I thought it was more of a daily thing because that's what I do with it. But I'm going to try the 5 days now because it does make it last longer. And I have noticed a benefit of just adding niacinamide. So can you talk about that one in particular? Like that one I know goes hand in hand with helping to produce more carbon dioxide and elevate the metabolism and everything. So can you talk about that?
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't know if there's an enzyme in the body which niacinamide doesn't affect.
I know.
And mostly because niacinamide itself doesn't have much of a direct effect. It does have a direct effect. The unchanged molecule of niacinamide inhibits a gene known as sirtuin type 1, SIRT1. Niacinamide is acting opposite to another famous chemical which is being sold as a dietary supplement known as resveratrol. Resveratrol made all the waves in the early 2000s. There was even a company that was spun off, and it went to clinical trials. Long story short, a lot of people died, unfortunately, during the clinical trials taking resveratrol. But rest assured, niacinamide is capable of blocking these negative effects of resveratrol. But more importantly, niacinamide gets converted into the body into something called NAD, which stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And that molecule is a crucial cofactor in the production of energy from both fat and glucose. But more importantly, its levels are known to almost perfectly correlate with levels of ATP. So for every 12 molecules of ATP you produce, 10 of them are due to the presence of NAD. And the other 2 are due to the presence of another vitamin B, known vitamin B2, which is in the body gets converted to something called FAD, flavonine adenine dinucleotide. So basically, NAD is this universal energetic cofactor, but it has beneficial effects on its own. Whenever the NAD to the NADH ratios are elevated, you tend to metabolize food at a really higher rate, even without much thyroid, even without getting the natural desiccated thyroid or synthetic thyroid support. It's just that your cells are capable of processing more food input and turning into carbon dioxide and water just by simply increasing the ratio of NAD to NADH, and that happens by taking more niacinamide. In addition, by keeping the NAD to the NADH ratio higher, you're inhibiting excess lipolysis. So like if lipolysis and fatty acid oxidation are a surrogate for stress or even a trigger for stress, then keeping them under control is a great way to keep under control the entire stress response, which is almost entirely metabolic. So by inhibiting excessive lipolysis, excessive fatty acid oxidation, even when you're under stress, your body doesn't perceive that event as stressful as if you let the fat run its course unchecked. So it has also NAD, the higher level of NAD to the NADH. It also helps to deactivate cortisol. So cortisol is overproduced during stress, and in some people that are under chronic stress, they chronically upregulate their production of cortisol, and it stays up. That's why they can't sleep. One of the reasons they can't sleep. One of the reasons they have this manic energy, and they can never relax. And I think it's such a great thing. They're the most productive people in the world. Yeah, but it doesn't last longer, and it's not a good feeling after a while. Maybe initially. So the niacinamide, by converting it to NAD, keeping the NAD to the NADH ratio high, it allows you to deactivate cortisol when it's no longer needed. That is the proper response. Not having a ton of cortisol floating around and keeping you, wired, not even tired, just wired all the time, and dissolving your bones, your muscles, your skin, and everything that is dear to you and me, right? That's what cortisol does. It takes this tissue and converts it to glucose so you can metabolize it as energy. So also keeping the NAD to the NADH ratio high, it allows you to synthesize more GABA. It allows you to deactivate more serotonin. It allows you to synthesize more dopamine. It allows you to keep prolactin and estrogen at bay. It allows you to synthesize more progesterone. It allows you to convert cholesterol into all of the downstream hormones that you need, while keeping the ones like estrogen and prolactin, keeping these from reaching critical levels that become pathological. So it's a very upstream, very high level balancing nutrient that really has, I don't know of a single negative effect that it has if you take it at reasonable dosages. And it's dirt cheap too. Recently, a company called Chromadex, which your listeners may want to look up on the internet, they're running clinical trials with a derivative niacinamide called nicotinamide riboside. Yes. And all this is, it's a simple molecule which takes niacinamide and takes a sugar known as ribose, and it joins them together. And they're telling you everything that I just told you, all of these benefits that are ascribed to niacinamide, they're also true of nicotinamide riboside. But guess what? Nicotinamide riboside is a patented molecule, and getting a bottle of 50 pills costs, I think, $70 to $80. Guess what? Plain old niacinamide works just as well, and it's dirt cheap. And in many cases, you can probably get it in a much purer, in much higher quality, much purer concentration, because their companies have been producing it for decades, and they're very well versed into the production mechanism. The nicotinamide riboside is a much newer molecule. There's a lot of secrecy surrounding it, and we won't know for sure about its production process for at least another decade until it becomes a generic chemical that everybody produces. For now, the company is very tight-lipped and doesn't share much about the production process. All they're saying is that, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. You better try it. Well, I say, sure. How about you try niacinamide? Same thing for 100th of the price.
Right. Well, and your product that contains niacinamide is much more affordable than that. Like try like an eighth of the cost of that or something. So, so I do want to recommend this to people. And I mean, there are so many products on your website actually that would help increase energy. But if people will think about it, when you go to the store, you'll see like stress B complex. So we know that what you said, our B vitamins are very important for helping to lower our stress. And that when you lower that stress, that is when you're going to get your energy levels up, just as easy as that. So, they can find your product at idealabsdc.com, just so they understand that you are so humble. You probably don't even want to say where your website is, but I will say it, idealabsdc.com. They can pick up Energen, and it's one of my favorite products, and I really wanted to bring it to fruition here so everybody knew about it. And we'll be doing more of these because you have a wealth of products on there that, like I said, do what they say they're supposed to do, and you get results with them. So I'm really passionate about Idea Labs. Just so if the people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that, Georgie?
Best way is probably through email. My email is HAIDUT, H is in Harry, A-I-D as in dog, U-T as in Tom, @gmail.com. It's pretty easy because my online moniker is HAIDUT. That's how I post. And also probably through the Repeat forum where I post a lot of my research. And now I have my own blog, which is again haidut.me. Yeah, you can check it out. I started.
That's new to me. I haven't even looked at that yet, so I'm excited to look at that. So haidut.me, right?
Haidut.me, very easy to remember, and I post almost daily on the blog. So
perfect. I've been waiting for that, so that's good to hear.
Very simple. It's a very it's not flashy. It's just a blog, and
Perfect. That's all we need. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to doing another podcast with you. But until next time, thank you for joining me, and you guys take care of your energy, and we'll catch you next time.
Yes, as Repeat said, keep stress low and fun high.
That's right. Very good.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Peace.
Yep. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hey out there, I'm about to drop one more bit of knowledge about why you should drop an F-bomb. So I have ripped open a packet of coconut oil here, but I'm not going to eat it. I am going to use it as a little natural moisturizer. So you know how when you travel you don't want to take a whole lot, especially nowadays they only let you take a carry-on, and maybe you're just going away for the weekend and you need some moisturizer, you need some sunscreen to take with you. Well, guess what? Coconut oil is kind of nature's sunscreen. So you pack one of these little bad boys with you, and not only can you eat it, but you can put it on your skin, and it's nature's best sunscreen because it's a natural way to protect from the sun in a low-grade way, so you can stay out all day, get a little color, but not get burnt. Also, maybe after the gym you want to moisturize and then head to work, you can use this. Maybe you need to get a little dryness out of your hair. This is a wonderful way to saturate the hair and really soothe the hair. Pour it all over your head, let it sit with a shower cap for a couple hours, and then rinse it out and wash it, and you're gonna have really soft, silky hair. And your scalp will be soothed too. If you have kind of itchy scalp, coconut oil is great for that. There are so many great reasons to have a packet of coconut oil with you, not just for eating, but also for body and skincare purposes. Works great as a face oil and a body oil. So check out dropinfbomb.com and get some of these handy dandy little packets to keep with you. Even if you're not into eating it, you're gonna find it really beneficial to just take on the go with you. Oh, also, you can use my code GETFIT, GETFIT, to save 20%. Thanks for watching.